There's an immense power hidden in silence, one that most people underestimate because they believe strength lies only in speaking up, defending themselves, or proving others wrong. But true strength, the kind that shakes foundations and shatters egos, often comes from choosing not to engage, from holding your peace when provoked. When you stop reacting to someone else's need to dominate the conversation or control the narrative, you step into a place of quiet power. Silence isn't weakness. It's a boundary, a declaration that you won't participate in the drama that diminishes your worth. It's saying, I see your ego, I'm not feeding it. And this refusal to fuel their fire quietly unravels the illusions of control they cling to. You don't have to argue to be right. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. When you choose silence over confrontation, you're not hiding or shrinking. You're standing firm in your own dignity. This kind of silence forces others to face themselves because it breaks their expectation that you will dance to their tune. It's uncomfortable for them because it leaves a void where they once held power. That discomfort is the first crack in their armor. This silence also allows you to reclaim your energy. Every word spent on proving someone wrong is energy stolen from your growth, your peace, your happiness. When you stop giving that energy away, you redirect it back to yourself, healing wounds that words can't touch and building resilience no argument could provide. Your silence is an act of self-respect, a refusal to lower your vibration to match their chaos. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't escalate the situation. It transforms it. It leaves space for reflection, for clarity, and for perspective. In that space, egos lose their grip because they rely on noise and reaction to survive. Without your participation, their ego-driven stories fall flat and lose meaning. Your silence is not empty. It's full of power, calm, and undeniable strength. So don't be afraid of silence. Don't rush to fill it with explanations or defenses. Embrace it as a tool for your freedom. Let your quiet be a mirror that shows others what true strength looks like. Calm, unshaken, and beautifully whole. In that silence, you don't just protect your peace. You break the ego that tries to steal it. There comes a moment when you realize that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every opinion deserves your response, and not every person is entitled to your energy. That realization is the beginning of true self-respect. Silence in those moments becomes more than just the absence of words. It becomes a powerful boundary. It's the space where your dignity speaks louder than your voice ever could. People who thrive on conflict, on dominance, on the need to prove they're right, often expect you to argue back, to defend yourself, to lose your calm. That expectation is their control. But when you choose silence, you disrupt that dynamic completely. Your quiet refusal to react becomes a shield that guards your peace and confuses their ego. It tells them without words, you can throw your chaos my way, but I won't receive it. Silence is not passive. It's deliberate. It's a decision rooted in deep inner strength that says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you. It becomes a line you draw, not in anger, but in awareness, that separates what you will engage with from what you will no longer tolerate. This boundary is not about building walls around your heart. It's about honoring your emotional capacity. It's about understanding that your time, your energy, your voice, these are sacred. They should not be given away just because someone else feels entitled to them. In silence, you reclaim your right to choose your battles. You stop reacting to every poke and prod designed to provoke a version of you that no longer exists. You stop explaining yourself to those who have already made up their minds about you. And this kind of silence, it is not quiet at all. It echoes, it lingers, it unsettles those who expect a version of you that is no longer available for conflict. It reveals the shift in you that can't be undone, not by guilt, not by manipulation, not by pressure. It is the kind of boundary that teaches people how to treat you, not through confrontation, but through consistency. Because over time, when your silence becomes the standard response to disrespect, to arrogance, to emotional games, people either learn to meet you with the same respect, or they remove themselves. Either way, your silence has spoken. There's something profoundly disarming about silence in moments when others expect you to explode, defend, or crumble. Most people are conditioned to communicate through reaction. They provoke because they want to see a reaction, to feel control, to reaffirm their sense of superiority. When someone pushes you with harsh words, subtle jabs, or passive aggression, they're not just testing your patience. They're testing your emotional stability. They want confirmation that they can still get under your skin. But when you don't flinch, when you don't respond the way they're used to, you throw off their entire game. Your silence becomes an interruption, a quiet, piercing pause in their carefully rehearsed script. It breaks the rhythm of manipulation. It makes them feel the weight of their own words without the distraction of your defense. Most egos thrive on predictability. They expect the same arguments, the same emotional responses, the same cycle of reaction. They rely on you to play your part in the same drama you've always been cast in. But silence removes you from the performance. It tells them that the version of you they're trying to provoke no longer exists. Or if it does, it's no longer available for their validation. That shift, that sudden break in the pattern, is deeply unsettling to someone who depends on power games to feel secure. They don't know how to interpret your silence, so they start second, guessing themselves. The very thing they once used to feel powerful, your reaction, has been taken away, and what's left is the sound of their own insecurity echoing back at them. Without your emotional response to feed their ego, they're left to sit with their discomfort, their words, their tone, and the consequences of how they show up. Silence does not just quiet the conversation, it magnifies their behavior. It forces them to look inward whether they're ready or not. It becomes a mirror, one they didn't ask for, reflecting not your flaws, but theirs. And the longer you stay silent, the clearer that reflection becomes. They may try harder to provoke you at first, desperate to restore the dynamic they once controlled. But when you don't give in, they begin to realize they've lost access to your emotional world. They can't reach you the way they used to. In this way, silence becomes a disruption that is not cruel, but necessary. It's a declaration that your peace matters more than their performance. It's a quiet rebellion that says, I'm done performing for your expectations. And that, more than any argument, breaks the hold they thought they had on you. Some people will try to convince you that if you don't speak up, if you don't argue back, if you don't defend your side, then you're weak. Passive, submissive, scared. But that belief says more about their understanding of strength than it does about yours. Silence has been misunderstood for far too long. We live in a world that worships noise. Louder voices, stronger opinions, faster reaction. But real power doesn't always come from volume, it often comes from restraint. It's easy to lash out, to meet disrespect with more disrespect. It's easy to raise your voice, slam the door, or fire back with sharp words. What's hard, what takes incredible emotional maturity, is choosing not to. Silence is not the absence of courage. It is courage restrained. It is knowing exactly what you could say to cut them down, to win the argument, to walk away feeling superior. And deciding that your peace is worth more than the satisfaction of being right. That kind of strength isn't loud. It's calm, it's centered, and it is absolutely unshakable. You see, weakness reacts, but strength chooses, and silence is a choice, a powerful one. It's the refusal to dance in someone else's chaos. It's the quiet rebellion against being dragged into emotional warfare you didn't sign up for. When you stay silent, you are not surrendering. You are preserving. You are choosing to hold onto your integrity in moments when it would be easier to let it slip. You're refusing to lose yourself in someone else's storm. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, and make no mistake. People notice. They may try to label you as cold, distant, or even afraid, because they don't understand the depth of self-control it takes to stay composed when provoked. But what you're doing is rising above, not running away. And in that rise, you're reclaiming your emotional space. You're stepping out of the noise so you can hear your own truth more clearly, because not every conversation deserves your voice. And not every argument is worth your time. Not every person is entitled to a response. Silence, when chosen with intention, becomes your quiet declaration that you no longer need to prove your worth through confrontation. You've already proven it by walking away whole. There's a cost to every argument, every heated reply, every moment you spend trying to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. That cost is your energy, and energy is not just some invisible force. It's your time, your focus, your emotional well-being. It's the part of you that gets drained every time you react to provocation or pour yourself into a conversation that leads nowhere. Silence is how you stop paying that price. It's how you start protecting what's sacred inside you. Because when you realize that not every insult needs a rebuttal and not every confrontation deserves your engagement, you begin to understand just how much energy you've been giving away for free. We're taught to respond, to defend, to explain, but no one tells us how heavy that becomes. The emotional exhaustion of constantly trying to prove our intentions, to fix misunderstandings, to correct false assumptions. It slowly wears us down. It robs us of the clarity we need to move forward, the peace we need to heal, and the strength we need to grow. Silence changes that. It's not just about what you avoid, it's about what you reclaim. Every time you choose not to engage in unnecessary conflict, you're choosing yourself. You're choosing your calm, your clarity, your direction. You're conserving the parts of you that matter most. People with loud egos often demand your energy without ever asking for it directly. They bait you with words, twist situations to get a reaction, pull you into their emotional whirlwind. But your silence is how you say, "You don't have access to my peace." It's how you shut the door without slamming it. It's how you walk away without running. You don't have to participate in every battle you're invited to. Some battles are designed to leave you depleted, not victorious. And the moment you understand that, your silence becomes your protection. In that quiet space, you'll notice something beautiful. Your mind begins to clear, your emotions start to settle, and you reconnect with your inner compass. You're no longer reacting. You're reflecting. You're no longer consumed. You're conserving. You're no longer proving. You're preserving. And what you preserve through silence, your emotional balance, your mental clarity, your peace, is far more valuable than any point you could have made in an argument that was never meant to be resolved. In a world that demands immediate reactions and constant noise, silence becomes a radical act of clarity. When we step back and stop speaking, not out of fear, but out of intention, we allow space for what's real to surface. Most conflicts are clouded with emotion, confusion, assumptions, and defense, but silence cuts through that fog. It doesn't just mute the chaos, it invites clarity in. When you no longer feel the need to respond to every opinion or accusation, you begin to hear what actually matters. Your own thoughts become louder. Your intuition, once buried beneath noise, starts to speak. This clarity doesn't always arrive right away. Sometimes silence feels uncomfortable at first, like an empty room we're not used to sitting in. But if you stay there, if you resist the urge to fill the space with explanations or apologies, you begin to see things differently. You realize which battles were about someone else's insecurities, not your failures. You begin to notice where you've been giving too much of yourself, simply to keep the peace. And that insight only comes when you stop talking and start listening, not to them, but to yourself. Silence is a reset. It's the breath between your reaction and your realization. It's the moment you ask yourself, is this really worth it? And more often than not, it isn't. Most of what demands our reaction is just noise, ego, projection, unhealed wounds in someone else dressed up as anger or judgment. When you remain silent, you allow those things to pass by you instead of through you. You let them reveal themselves for what they are, without absorbing them into your identity. And while others may interpret your silence as avoidance or weakness, it is in fact wisdom. You are choosing to respond later, when the dust has settled and the truth is clearer. Or maybe you're choosing not to respond at all because you've realized the clarity you gained in silence is more valuable than the validation you could gain in conversation. That's when silence becomes more than a pause, it becomes a filter. It helps you separate what's urgent from what's important, what's loud from what's true. And in that quiet, you find the answers that chaos tried to keep hidden. Ego thrives on noise. It feeds on reactions, on being seen as right, on winning. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about control. When someone's ego is in charge, they don't want conversation. They want domination. They want to feel superior. They want to pull you into a power game where their pride is at stake. But silence refuses to play. Silence steps out of the arena and says, "You can swing, but I'm not fighting back." And in that moment, the ego, theirs and even sometimes your own, begins to lose its grip. You see, ego cannot survive without response. It needs resistance to define itself. It needs your defensiveness to justify its stance. When you don't respond, when you choose calm over chaos, distance over drama, you strip the ego of its illusion of power. The silence becomes a mirror, and without your words to distract or deflect, the person is left to see their own behavior clearly, maybe for the first time. That stillness exposes the cracks in their certainty. It confronts them with a truth that can't be shouted over or denied. The power they thought they held over you no longer exists. But it's not just their ego that begins to unravel, yours does too. Because let's be honest, Sometimes your own ego wants to scream, "They don't get to treat me like this," or "I need to show them who I am." That voice inside wants justice, validation, acknowledgement. And that desire isn't wrong, it's human. But silence teaches you that not every injustice needs to be confronted to be healed. Some things are better left without reaction, not because they don't matter, but because you matter more. The deeper truth is this: when you stay silent, not from fear but from wisdom, you're not just breaking the cycle. They are. You're healing your ego's need to be right, and you're forcing their ego to sit in the discomfort of not being able to provoke you. And that space between what they expected and what you delivered, that silence, it's where real power lies. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you've grown past the need to react. Because the most unshakable kind of power is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't rise when challenged. It stands still. It watches. It waits. And it always, always knows who it is, even when someone else tries to define it. There's a certain discomfort people feel when you no longer respond. Not because you're angry, not because you're avoiding, but because your silence holds up a mirror they didn't ask to look into. When you withdraw your words, when you stop explaining, defending, justifying, what you leave behind is space. And in that space, people are forced to sit with themselves. Without your voice filling the room, all that's left is their own. Their own conscience, their own tone, their own reflection. And that can be terrifying for someone who's used to distracting themselves with blame. Silence is often misunderstood as avoidance, but the truth is, it's the ultimate confrontation. It's what happens when you've said everything there is to say and realize that no amount of words can fix what someone refuses to acknowledge. So you stop talking, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You're done trying to reach someone who isn't willing to listen, and that absence, it's louder than any speech. It makes them question not just what they said, but why they said it. It makes them feel the weight of their behavior with no one else to carry it for them. When you choose silence, you remove the emotional cushion that used to protect them from accountability. Your words may have once softened the blow of their own actions, given them justification, or helped them rewrite the narrative. But without that buffer, they have to confront the raw truth. It's no longer about you, it's about them. And for someone whose ego depends on being right, your silence forces them to ask the very question they avoided. Was I wrong? It doesn't happen instantly. At first, they might lash out louder, try harder to provoke, accuse you of being cold, distant, disrespectful. But eventually, when they realize you're not coming back into the emotional tug-of-war anymore, they're left with the silence and everything it brings with it. Their guilt, their defensiveness, their confusion, and maybe eventually their realization. That's the quiet brilliance of silence. It gives people the time and space to reflect, to feel the consequences of their own actions without your interference. And whether they change or not is no longer your burden to carry. You didn't go silent to punish them. You went silent to protect yourself. And in doing so, you gave them a gift they didn't know they needed. The opportunity to finally face who they are, not through your reaction, but through their own reflection. There comes a moment in your life when you stop speaking not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understand your worth. Silence in that moment becomes more than a pause, it becomes a declaration. A quiet, unwavering statement that says, I no longer have to shrink myself to be understood. I no longer need to beg to be respected. Because when you've been pushed too far, talked over, manipulated, or emotionally drained, you reach a sacred threshold. And once you cross it, you realize that your silence is the loudest form of self-respect. You stop responding to people who only hear what they want. You stop over-explaining to those who twist your words. You stop engaging with anyone who confuses access to your life with the right to disrespect it. And instead, you let your absence speak. You let your quiet become your boundary, not a wall built from bitterness, but a gate built from healing. You choose peace over performance, dignity over drama, and that choice is not weakness. It's not running away. It's not being too sensitive. It is wisdom. It is maturity. It is choosing to honor your own energy above someone else's entitlement. Because when you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you're not avoiding confrontation. You're redefining it. You're saying, I'm not lowering myself to meet you in chaos. You're saying, I love myself too much to keep proving it to someone who doesn't value it. And slowly, those around you begin to feel the shift. The ones who once fed off your emotional labor begin to realize it's no longer available. The ones who thrived off your reactions begin to wither in the absence of them. And the ones who truly see you begin to respect your quiet. Your silence becomes a filter. It separates who is willing to meet you with equal respect and who is only ever comfortable when they could control your voice. And while some may leave, let them. While some may criticize, let them. Because anyone who demands that you betray your own peace for the sake of their comfort never deserved your presence to begin with. Silence will show you that. It will show you who belongs and who is only ever there for the sound of your breaking. In the end, silence is not just a tool, it's a revolution of self, love, of boundaries, of strength that doesn't need to roar to be heard. It's the purest form of self-respect. And once you begin speaking that language, you'll never again explain your worth to someone who's already decided to ignore it. You'll just walk away and let the silence say everything. There will always be people who push, provoke, manipulate, and demand more of you than they ever intend to return. They will test your boundaries, challenge your worth, and expect you to explain your pain just to make them feel better about causing it. But your healing does not require their permission. Your growth does not depend on their understanding. And your peace is not something you owe to anyone who threatens it. When you choose silence, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of strength, you begin to rise above the noise. You stop asking for validation from people who benefit from your doubt. You stop chasing closure from those who never cared enough to offer clarity. And most importantly, you stop shrinking just to keep relationships intact that were built on the condition that you never fully stand in your power. Your silence is not an absence. It is a presence, a firm, grounded presence that says, I know who I am now. I don't have to fight for a place at a table where I'm constantly asked to apologize for existing. I don't need to prove my value to anyone too blind to see it. I don't need to explain my truth to people who have already decided to deny it. I simply need to be still, to be clear, to be free. And in that silence, something incredible happens. People begin to hear themselves. The echo of their own actions, the weight of their own words, the consequences of what they once believed would go unchecked. Your silence holds up a mirror that no amount of talking ever could. And in doing so, you don't just protect your peace. You awaken theirs. So let your silence be sacred. Let it be your strength. Let it be the line you draw not in anger, but in love, for yourself. Because when you stop giving everyone access to your voice, you finally begin to hear your own. And that voice, it doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase. It simply whispers the truth, I am done. I am free, and I am home within myself.